Hi everyone. Uh, Today Asian American News Network is with Julia Kang-Reeves. And first of all, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. As you said, my name is Julia Kang-Reeves, and I am the Chief Marketing Director of an Asian American owned bath and beauty company called Earth Therapeutics. And we've been around for over 30 years.
Oh, that's awesome. And my first question is, how do you think your Asian immigrant background had shaped your character?
It's a profound question, I think. I think it had so much to do. I think it probably had about 95% to do
Oh,
with
that's a lot.
how it shaped my character. My parents, my entire family immigrated from South Korea in the early 70s. And so it was a long time ago, and things were a little different, I think, for Asian Americans back then than it is now. It's always a dream for many people, and people in different countries to come to America and to start a life and to start a family. And the whole notion of the American dream is very powerful as a positive thing. But, there are difficulties as well. I think that I still remember the day, we moved from Korea, from Seoul, Korea to Flushing. And I remember the first time I had pizza, like having eaten Korean food, for all my life and then having pizza. I just thought it was the most bizarre thing. Um, it was this bread and tomato. What a weird combination. Of course, my parents, being immigrant parents, were very focused on my academic success and that of my brothers. Um, and just watching them as immigrants build a business and being privy to the challenges that they had, not only their language, because they didn't really speak English very well, they really didn't have much money, and just struggling and achieving, and then struggling and achieving and struggling and achieving. I think, despite the challenges, I feel so I don't know if honored or thankful, grateful that I actually saw people achieve something tremendous and rise every time they face something that looked like impossible to overcome. They did. And I have that. I feel like I have that in my blood and bones because I am an immigrant and am the child of an immigrant, and I tried to pass that on to my daughter. So I always have that resource to pull from.
That's awesome. So, what's the role that your family plays through your career? Family is a very important role in your past experience.
Yeah, I actually think my family plays more of a role than than normal because I work in a family business. And so I see them all the time. Um, yeah, I after I graduated college, I did work at different jobs and I lived in a different country, and but coming back and working for my family business, it's it's very interesting because aside from the emotional connections as family, they're my colleagues, they're my business colleagues, and um, it's interesting that, no longer are my brothers just, people who annoyed me when I was young. I mean, you kind of have an opportunity to kind of deal with them as adults, and that relationship is constantly evolving. And, there's this saying that if you really want to get to know someone, you travel with them or you do business with them. You really get to know people in very difficult situations and the choices that they make. So yeah, so that's I am getting to know my family quite intimately, probably more so than if I didn't work with them.
Okay. So, what qualities do you think is very most important for a leader to lead the team?
That is a brilliant question. I lead a team and I lead a team of much younger people. And I am so impressed by them. And I learn a lot from them all the time. I think that foremost, to be a really good leader is to be very sort of sensitively attuned to everybody in the group. And to make all of them feel seen and feel heard. And because I think sometimes problems arise not only in a company situation, but in any kind of relationship when, people don't feel seen or heard. And I think, just going back to your original question of being Asian American and how that influenced me, I think, for some reason, Asian Americans, sometimes I think, especially back then in particular, had a problem being feeling seen and feeling heard. And so I'm very sensitive to that. And I give my team a lot of attention and a lot of voice. And if I sense like I am very intuitively keyed into when they're having an issue and I'm also encouraging, I give a lot of feedback. Sometimes even if I'm overwhelmed by emails from so many things, if I see emails from my own team, I always make it a point to reply to them or, give an encouraging word. And but also, encouraging and honest and to give honest feedback and um, so they know the boundaries. And I had a great boss. My first boss, I was working in publishing and I was quite young. And I realized that so much of the way she treated me and so much of what I witnessed of her every day and her behavior so much influenced everything I do at work and even the way I treat my employees and treat my team. People are always concerned about, being very professional and very dry. And I don't think that should be the case. I know that there has to be some professionalism in business, but I think that people feel a little stifled by that. And I encourage them to just be who they are. Sometimes things do get emotional. And, if you don't deal with that then and there, it kind of finds other ways of expression, which can be more negative.
How you transition out of field of literature into the market department? And what's the reason behind it, and what difficulty did you face during this time?
You obviously did your research. I keep waiting for someone to ask me that question. You're asking a very good question, and I think it's a very relevant question these days because in education, everyone is saying, liberal arts education is worthless. Why do that when yeah, there's a lot of controversy in education and in higher education. When I was going to school, even though my parents were very focused on my doing well in school, I think they were so busy, they didn't really know what I was studying. They were just like, just send back good grades. And so as long as, my grades were good, they continued to pay for my education. And I majored in classical literature and languages, which
Mm.
is ancient Greek and Latin literature. Um, and I majored in it because I was just really curious. I wanted to know how civilization began. And I wanted to go as far back as possible. So I majored in the classics, and I thought, oh, I could study philosophy, I could study literature, I could study, history of classics. It was very multidisciplinary. And then I ended up going to graduate school to study that, to eventually become a professor. But what I found was that academia was especially what I was studying, it was very kind of a closed system back then. And the graduate school I went to was also a lot more what is the word? It's not as like open-minded as my undergraduate institution. It was a bit more formal in their interpretation of what the classics were. So I didn't have the same kind of fun sort of romping around exploration as I did as an undergrad. And I also, since I loved literature, I also felt like academia felt a little dry and a little too I want to be a bit more creative. So I left my PhD program to pursue my writing degree and get my MFA. And that was very interesting because I learned a whole different form of writing. It's not, people think writing is just writing, but academic writing and, writing a novel are two very different parts of your brain. Um, and eventually, I got married and ended up having a child and raising that child for many years. And I think it was kind of a series of events, and just as your network was born during COVID, COVID also, when I was living in London, made me feel like I need to get back home to America and to New York and be with my family because my parents were getting older. I wanted my daughter to go to college in America because I had such a great experience. So even though I had been working with my family when my brother began his business in the early 90s, I had been away for about 20 years in London. And when I came back, the world had changed. There was social media, there was, TikTok. That's when TikTok was really taking off.
Um,
Beauty was like, it just was explosive. And so even though I worked in marketing and PR 20 years ago, coming back was a whole new world. And um, I had to learn so many things that, as someone who is a, Gen Xer, this was kind of stuff that was new to me. But I found it just really fascinating, what was happening. And I loved, like, I always felt like I had a sense of like what was happening in the world, like just trends. I pick up on trends, quickly, and I just get a gut sense for things. And even though I used to be a very bookish person, um,
uh,
I found that through living and after being a mother, I felt like there was something very interesting about just being in the moment. And you can't always consult a book, you can't always think about things. When you go to business, especially these days, because it's so quickly paced, you just have to like be in the flow and make decisions right and left, like just kind of go with your gut. I would say like even though I started off as a very bookish and literary person, as I got older, you just evolve and you just see what, your gifts are and, what the circumstances call for. But having said that, I think that having majored in the classics and literature was the best possible education for me in doing what I do now. And I tell this to my daughter all the time that, don't study marketing if you want to do marketing. Study like I know this is not conventional wisdom these days, but I feel like the timeless classics that I read and studied, slaved away over translating ancient Greek, they gave me a lot of insight into why things last for a long time. Why are we still reading these books? Why are we forced to read these books and these classics? And so I feel like I got a sense of sort of the magical, ingredient of what makes something last and what makes something work. And that was always my main question. It was like my through line question. Like what makes a classic? Why do things last? Why do things work? Despite the age, despite thousands of years. And I see my work through those glasses every day. Like when I look at something, I ask myself, well, what is going to make this work? What is going to make this last? And so I have answered your question in terms of like how I transitioned from literature to business and also the use of literature in business and doing something practical in business and also making money so you can live.
Creative and exploring are playing pretty important role in your experience.
I think that's so important. I think just being creative is intrinsic part of being a human being. And I think everyone craves being creative. Um, but creativity is probably like the most difficult thing you could do. It's like, it's kind of like, I remember when I started writing creatively and, waking up every morning and just kind of facing a blank page and, eking through a novel and like really there's no hell like writing a book. But you get I as much as it was like painful and difficult, I loved it too. And there's no high greater than, creativity. And I think, in this day and age, like when people are contesting AI and AI doing all these things for you and it's true, like it robs you of the satisfaction that some of this difficulty gives you. And I think it also builds like a cognitive, it builds your brain. And I am a strong believer in something called neuroplasticity, which is like your mind is always regenerating, even beyond, uh, older age. And the more you challenge it, the more it's going to stay with you. And it's like constantly exercising your mind. But yeah, I mean, creativity, like, I- and creativity isn't just like, painting a picture or writing a book. Creativity is, um, putting together a marketing campaign or, even what you're doing, being creative. So I'm a big proponent of creativity, and I think it's the crux of being a human being.
Creativity is very important. So my next question is, what's the some future goal of your career and your for the company?
Another good question. I think, COVID really kind of changed the way I look at goal making and how I look at the future. It made me so flexible. You have to be flexible to live in this world. Things are so fast paced. Precise goal is to just really like be like starkly, judicious in like what is working and then kind of going with it and maybe even being a forerunner because no one else may know or no one is agreeing with you, but just kind of being as economic as possible with time.
That's good to hear it. And what is the secret behind the success of the Earth Therapeutics?
Earth Therapeutics, yeah, it's family run and it's family operated and family owned, and so we have like we're pretty, tight about, decision making. And we kind of know like if something is going wrong and we can course correct quite quickly. We make cautious decisions. We don't expand too quickly. We don't spend money on things that you don't need to spend money on. My brother is quite shrewd. He's a very shrewd business person, and my parents were very shrewd business people. But also, I think maybe this is part of being Asian American and having had the immigrant experience. They're very good at like committing to things, and if they're going to commit to something, they're going to commit to it, 100%, do or die. But commitment is depth. And I think that, just commitment to something that is meaningful. I think that's the secret.
So we're done with our interview. Thank you so much for accept the interview, and hope you keep exploring. I guess, like keep learning new things. And
Thank you so much. I so much, appreciated your questions and had a lot of fun. And I wish you the best. And I hope that your network continues to grow because it's very important. And yeah, so best of luck to you and your organization.
thank you.